appreciate you guys coming in. There were like 37 people, and I'm like, okay, how many are going to lose when there's the bridge?
And the weather.
And we got the weather.
Yes.
I was laughing and joking basically with Chris, and I know what all the hubbub's about because I live at Shem Creek. I was coming up from Daniel Island and basically ended up on Coleman at right by that intersection where Coleman meets 526. And it took me 40 minutes to get to my house at Shem Creek, basically. I was like, okay, this is not funny anymore. So for the first time I started to appreciate how bad this can get. So ironically, here's the topic is about distributed and remote teams, which is kind of interesting. I don't normally do this, I guess, when I've got a speaker, but last night I just went online just to see what I could learn very quickly on remote teams. And I didn't realize this, that 63% of the companies out there today have remote workers. And it's a heavily grown, this thing is jumping by about 3 points a year. So if you think in the direction we're going, it's just going to get more and more aggressive. And I didn't want to, I'm sure Laura's going to cover some of these things, but I would encourage you guys to look at, there was one site that did a really good job about why distributed teams, and really what's driving it is not choice, it's a necessity. Companies want the talent, they will go get it wherever they can and that kind of thing. And as a community, like I was just telling basically, we just having a conversation, we're pivoting to understand that national companies are coming to Charleston. How do we benefit from that? And how do I leverage a name like Lending Tree or a name like Booz Allen? Well, Blackbaud's huge and they've done extremely well. But if I went 2 states over and talked about Blackbaud, nobody knew who Blackbaud was. But they know who Booz Allen was, they know who Lending Tree was, that kind of thing. 80% to 90% of the workers said they would like to work remote, at least part-time. So that's pretty, that's interesting. So the
80%?
Yeah, 80 to 90%. So are the companies then heading towards the workers, and the workers heading towards the companies? And so it's really some really interesting stuff that's kind of going on out there. I knew that Laura and I had something in common. I just never figured it out until basically, Kristen gave me this note about it. She said she's a card-carrying introvert. Basically,
I left my card at home though.
So I said, okay, no wonder basically, something. Pleased to have Laura Camacho, basically, Laura Mixon Camacho, basically. I didn't realize basically she's an MBA, PhD, and PM, which I didn't realize you were a PhD as well. Mm-hmm. So. From the Smithsonian Institute. Laura's an executive coach, corporate trainer, and international speaker. And what I just find her, for some reason, I find her very engaging and to a major extent entertaining. Which is kind of nice when you're a speaker to be able to do that. Her mission is to helping creatives and technical professionals with more successful conversations, engagement, and that kind of thing. So I think it's very appropriate. She'll tell you a little bit more about herself. That she's here presenting on a very, very important topic, and a topic that's growing, a subject that's actually growing in the workplace today. So, thank you for being here. I really do thank all of you guys for being here today with the with the conditions.
Yes, I am so touched.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. I'm going to ask you to indulge me just for a minute. I'm going to give a little bit of historical context for our topic. I know you don't come to the digital corridor to get a history lesson. But I do have I like to tell you anyway, because I think it helps lend some context to what we're going through right now. So I'm going to ask a question, and if nobody knows the answer, it's fine, because I don't think anybody else here is a professional communicator. But does anybody know, or can you think of what was like the first simultaneous transmission of a message, the first electronic message, before email? Yeah.
The telegraph.
The telegraph, exactly. And who sent the first message? Do you know? Samuel Morse. It was "What Hath God Wrought?" and that was in 1844, May 23rd, so around this same date. And that was the first time in the history of humanity that the message was essentially separated from any kind of transportation. It was the separation between communication and transportation, because prior to that point, it was either a messenger who brought the message or it was carried on a ship, but there had to be some kind of transportation to get that message to you. And that had huge ramifications, which I'm not going to go into. I'm only going to mention one. Because at that time, the cultural and intellectual elites, which are mostly in France, the common thinking among the the smart intellectuals at the time was that the United States of America would never succeed as a country, as a republic, because it was too big. It was like nobody can handle such a huge landmass. It's just impossible. And yet the development of the technology to deliver messages across distance, guess what? We're still here in 2018. We maybe have suffered some blows, but we're still standing. And it really made a difference. And another, just a little trivia, that in that time, in the early 19th century, that the electrical engineers and the people who had electrical or expertise were kind of like the coders, the people that could manage technology today. They were the wild, crazy, smart people who were changing the country. So we're going to talk about managing energy and distributed teams. And I'm not going to go more into my background. Ernest told you I started Smithsonian Institute 9 years ago. My very cool logo there, just to let you know, was designed by the person who used to do the social media for the Dog Whisperer. And all those things have meaning. So how many of you currently work on some kind of distributed team? Okay. So that's most people. How many people work internationally remote? I would say like 20%. Very impressive. I'll tell you, my first experience with remote work was in the early 90s, before the internet. I was working in Germany for a company in Caracas. I was a writer. I had been living in Caracas. I moved to Germany. And I was writing for them, and we used the fax machine to fax things back and forth. And I did that for 2 years, and we had very rare phone conversations. And when I moved back to Caracas, I didn't continue that work because after 2 years of working remotely, I had emotionally kind of disconnected from the company, and I was working elsewhere. And right now, I have an assistant in Tahoe, Nevada, and an intern in Atlanta. So they're a very small team. And we almost never meet, but we do talk to each other. So why remote work? Of course, Ernest went into that, and I wanted to also point out that this whole building and community started because Ernest saw that we needed higher paying jobs in this area, right? Because hospitality, as beautiful as it is, does not pay very well. So we needed the technology jobs that pay better. But then here we are, what does everybody talk about? Oh, it's so hard to get talent. It's so hard to get the right talent, the right know-how. So how can we do that? We can source workers outside of South Carolina, outside of Charleston. Or how many of you know people that, like the spouse got a job in Charleston and they're now working remotely for whatever company they used to work for? A friend of mine is working remotely for a company in New York City, getting New York City salary and living here. That's a sweet deal. And her husband just started working with the VA remotely doing telehealth. So they've got two workers in the same house, both working for external firms. And so the remoteness, the not being bilocated allows us to access the brain power of other people. It doesn't have to be local, so that's a huge advantage. But there are disadvantages. It's the different thing to manage people that you don't see every day than it is to manage people far away. And even though in this room everybody may be working in very advanced management practices, there's still a lot of the old command and control, the old-fashioned management philosophy. It doesn't translate well into remote teams, or teams that are not in the same location. So remote work allows people to have more flexibility. It's considered a perk sometimes. There's all kinds of different modalities. Trello is a company where everybody is remote. I think Debbie's company is kind of like that. Like everybody's remote. There's no headquarters. Some companies, certain people will ask to telecommute, or they ask to work from home, and it's considered a perk, and they're sometimes regarded with suspicion. And then there's all kinds of variations, and then there's people in here that have clients abroad. I just had a Zoom session with somebody in South Africa a couple weeks ago, and then recently this week, or Tuesday, with somebody in Lisbon. I mean, it's just the possibilities are crazy. So it opens up a lot of potential. Ernest gave you some figures. 43% of the people in that survey of 15,000 employees said that they were currently working from home. And from what Ernest told you, there's a lot more people who want to do that because they want the freedom. So what does it mean to have good energy? I mean, I love to work with these constructs that are hard to define and kind of nebulous, but you know they're there. And I think the basic physics definition of energy is the ability to do work, right? And then on top of the situation where we have people working together from different locations, how many of you have worked for a boss who had no clue on how to do your job? That used to not be the case. I mean, the olden days, the disciple would learn from the master, and then we had the factory. We had the factory model where the supervisor was making sure everybody was doing their widgets, they're making their widgets the right way. And now we have people working for people who have no idea how to do your job, or you don't know how to do their job. And it's so, how can you manage work if you don't know how to do it? So there's that layered, that's an extra layer of complexity. If you don't know how to do their job and you can't see them, how do you know they're doing their job, right? Or how do you know they're doing a good job? Or how do they convince you that they are? So these are the kinds of issues that come up with good energy. So good energy, I think, is really that's the main task of the manager or leader today. You're not going to be telling your people how to do their job, but creating a context where they feel energized, not only bringing their best selves to work, but working in the same direction. And so all of these variables go up when people feel good about their jobs, and these things go down when people don't feel good about their jobs. So of course you want your employees to feel valued, focused, and purposeful, right? Whether they're here, whether they're right next door to you, or right in the same office, or in Shanghai. Some of you were at Disrupt HR. One of the talks, people pointed out that, one of the speakers pointed out that employees want to feel empowered and they want to find meaning in their work. So those are things that we want our employees to have or feel, no matter where they are. So I'm going to present to you not the recipe. It's not like a formula. If you do this, this, and this, you're going to live happily ever after, but rather 5 components of managing distributed teams with good energy. So the first thing I want to clarify, because a lot of people comment on my energy, and I don't know if they say that because they don't know what else to say or what, but I get that a lot. But I want to make it clear that you don't have to be a manic cheerleader to be a person with good energy or to encourage that energy. You have, this is just putting it out on a spectrum from high to low and negative and positive. And if you're doing a deep dive into some kind of material, you don't need to be, all hyper, oh my gosh. You need to be calm, serene. You want it to be relaxed. And if you're, trying to sell your product, service, company, then you need to have higher energy. But there's all forms of different kinds of positive energy that are not necessarily the hyperactive, enthusiastic person. And then, of course, if someone's dog is in the hospital, you don't want to be like, oh my gosh, what's going to be fine, don't worry, tranquilo. No, you want, the energy to match the occasion, the context. So I have 5, these are, I was talking to Virgil Virga last week, because he has a company with a lot of remote workers, and he's like, how do you know those are the 5 things that people need to know? And I said, well, there are 5. They all start with P. It's not really that I'm not Moses coming from Sinai. These are not the 10 Commandments, but it's to help you remember. And I have a specific definition for each of my P's. So, purpose. You know, Simon Sinek has made so much money with start with why. I'm not bitter about it at all. Because we taught that with Stephen Covey long time ago. Purpose, and that's where, do you have meaning in your job? Does your employee find meaning in their work? Passion. I prefer the word enthusiasm, but it does not start with P, so we're using passion. You know, excitement about the work itself. Presence. Are you paying attention? Are you fully there? Because if you're on the phone even with someone who is playing on the internet or doing something else, you can tell. And they can tell the same with you. They can tell even without seeing you whether you are being present to them. Progress. Everybody wants to feel like they're improving. And, you know, while we all want our job, we all want to cross the finish line, sometimes you need to acknowledge that somebody has learned something, that they're moving in the right direction, or somehow taking the proper steps. And when you're the remote worker, it's harder to feel that because you're not able to see, to compare. You may not be having that small talk about the work to have an idea whether you're up to par, behind, ahead. And then, of course, positivity, you know, having hope about the future and the belief that things are going to work out. So, yes, this all brings us to communication, which is my favorite topic. But really, I want you to think about structured communication, because working with remote teams, I think you'll agree, you have to put more structure in your communication because you're not seeing them. And this can come up in all kinds of ways. We're going to go through at the end some tools. I'm going to go through these 5 P's that I talked about, but structured communication, because you can't see, you can't, you know, even if you don't even have a phone call with a person, you don't know how they're doing today. You need to have structure, not just depend on what you depend on when you're actually working face to face with a person. So let's, purpose, connecting to purpose. So a lot of people think, well, those people who work in healthcare or that they're teachers, they're the ones with the most purpose in their job. So I want you to raise your hand, look at these 5 categories, and tell me how many think florists and gardeners have the highest level of purpose. Now, purpose means meaning, that I sense meaning in my work. How many think it's hairdressers and estheticians? Come on, okay. Plumbers. 2. Physicians and dentists. And teachers. Okay, how many of you have actually worked as a teacher? Okay. So, number 1, and you may not be able to see the numbers here, is florists and gardeners. 87% feel a high level of purpose. So is it working in the dirt? Is it being more with nature? Is it the quietness of the work? But they sense the highest percentage of purpose. Next would be hairdressers and estheticians. And I think because they're helping people to look their best. Plumbers, though, look at them. They're not only making bank, they also have high level of purpose. What's there not to love about that? Physicians and dentists. The physicians, we know, are in particular feeling high levels of burnout today, so their level is lower. And then teachers are in last place. Are y'all surprised? No, yeah. It's the teachers. I think teaching is very noble, and it's a great profession, but you do burn out. So the point is, though, that you can feel purpose. As a plumber, they have very high sense of purpose. If you're a coder, you can have meaning in your work. A lot of times people say, oh, I want to find that job where I feel so fulfilled. But I think you have to bring yourself to the job and bring your meaning to the job, whatever job you're doing. But as a manager, you can help other people remind them, because like anything I'm telling you today, most of it I'm just reminding you of stuff you already know, because we just are all ADD and forgetting things. So these are different levels of purpose. So my work relates to my values. So if you're going to manage that, what has to happen? You have to know what the values are, right? And for that to happen, you have to have some kind of conversation, right? About values, which is not something that is a KPI, probably. But that is a very basic level, even if you're writing code, or you're transcribing, something, or teaching, or managing, or coaching. Does your work relate to your values? That's at the deepest level. And then our task is that the job that I'm doing matters. This is an aside, but it reminds me of an international experience a friend of my husband's had. This friend was training people in Russia right after the collapse of the Soviet Union in a McDonald's about customer service, being nice to the clients. Yeah. And the guy was like, but we have the food. Why do we have to be nice? So this guy obviously felt his job working at McDonald's had high impact because he had the food. All right, my work helps others to succeed. So are you creating jobs? Does your company create jobs? Is it creating some kind of asset or value for other people? And these are things that if you think about it, of course you could, figure that out for whatever job you're doing. But do you take the time to remind yourself and others? Do you have these discussions about the meaning in our work, even if we're not florists and gardeners or plumbers? And then there's the most broad level of meaning is that my work impacts society. So before we go on to passion, does anybody want to say something about connecting to purpose?
I have a question back with your little circles.
Okay.
Do you think one of the biggest problems with managing is the way the hiring process works?
Yes.
Because to get to the personal level, there's questions you can't ask in an interview, right? So there's ways that you really need to take advantage of the social aspect to get to the personal level so that you can understand whether someone is going to fit within your methodology.
Exactly. That's so true. So true. Yes.
But when you put a remote element in that, it's even harder.
Yes, it is. It is. And yes, I meant to say that earlier, but hiring is like a big piece of this. And I'm not really addressing that because I'm assuming you're working with who you're working with. But definitely you want to know the values of the person that you're hiring. And talking to people who recruit and talking about how do you assess their fit with your culture, the answer is to find out what their values are, but that's not in your typical question. But one question a recruiter suggested to me was to ask, what are your top 3 values and how have you applied them in your job, whatever job they're coming from? Would you agree? It's not a taboo topic, it's just not one we usually talk about, right? Because you're thinking about, can they do the job, can we afford them, that kind of thing.
Well, even a typical, you got 3 months in an evaluation period. You hire somebody, you put them on task, and now they're not around you.
Right.
Or if you hire somebody and now they're remote, that 3 months really isn't as valid as it used to be because you're not working side by side with somebody.
Exactly, because you're missing so much signaling. Because for all our many gazillions of channels of communication, face-to-face is by far the most powerful because you just see so much. You can tell so much about the person just the way they walk to their desk, or well, we're going to go into, all the signals that you're missing out on. Does anybody else want to say something before we go on to enthusiasm, I mean passion?
Ask you a little question.
Yeah,
Do you mind going back?
not at all.
So when you say levels of purpose from personal to social, is that in order of importance to the person, like where personal is the most important to them, that they're going to serve that first? Or do you mean it in the sense that the social potential impact is bigger, so that's more what they are focused on in work?
What I mean is that this is more like from the inside to the outside, and that some people, they don't really, they want to make a difference in the world, and so it doesn't matter that they don't really particularly care for what they're doing on a daily basis because, I'm helping, I'm feeding the hungry, the homeless, whatever. And then there's some people who just tune that out, and like introverts, it's like, we want this job to feel intrinsically meaningful, that I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm having an impact, and well, if it affects society, that's good, but I'm really focused here. So does that answer your question?
It does, yes, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, so passion, which is showing that you care about the work, that it's important to you, because if it's not important to you as the leader, how the heck is it going to be considered important? We have this saying in business about, oh, he's just checking the boxes. Oh, she's just checking the boxes. So it's crucially important that you as the leader not be the person who's just checking the boxes. But I have a question for you. So if we're not getting the body language, we're not getting the voice tone, that you really care about the job, how do you reach these distant employees? How do you show that you care about the work? Anybody want to take a stab? I mean, I don't have the answer. I mean, it's not like, oh, the answer is. It's a discussion. It's something to consider. Of course, if you started the company, clearly you cared enough to give up a lot to go through that. But it's something for you to keep in mind, that you need to show that it's important to you, so that transfers to other people. And are you communicating that? And are you sharing that? These are just some tools I threw out there. A lot of times we need to share more context in our communication. Like, why did you shift the priorities today? Why is this so important now when yesterday it was this other thing? Not just, stop working on this project and work on this other thing. Why? What's driving that change? We want to know the context. It's especially important because things that are obvious when you're in the same room are not obvious when you're distributed. And back in the day, when the traditional corporate structure was to have, the headquarters in Des Moines and then all these offices all over the world, one of the problems back in those golden days or old days, whatever, was that the people in the remote offices felt, nobody cares about us. Nobody tells me anything. It's always the distance, the physical distance from the perceived center of power has always led to feelings of insecurity, right? So tools, it's important to communicate time sensitivity when you're giving any kind of directive or changing the conversation, like, when do you need this? Why do you need it then? It's something that's not obvious to somebody who's not working with you. Of course, using video conferencing is a little bit more bulky, but it's pretty easy to use. Another tool is to come up with structure for your meetings. Sharing wins in the beginning of a meeting is a good one. Sometimes you can share a personal win and a positive and a professional win. And the use of emojis. I find that some people who work remotely use a lot of emojis. And I do mean like emojis like crazy. Like that takes time, to me. I guess I'm not a high-level emoji finder, but that is a skill you might consider incorporating to communicate your enthusiasm for the job. Does anybody want to share something about an experience with communicating enthusiasm, passion for the work? Yes.
My only hesitation with the emojis, I don't know if everybody else has found this, but it's like a false sense of emotion. Like, you'll say a message and you'll put an emoji, like a happy or laughing really loud, but it's kind of like an awkward, demanding message of sorts, or so. It's almost
You feel like it's manipulative?
not manipulative, but it's almost, you're saying one thing, you have an emoji saying something else, and you're trying to get to the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So
You're trying to offset.
Exactly.
Like, I need this now, haha, with a smiley face.
Yeah.
You're fired,
Yeah.
smiley face.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
You're fired, smiley.
Liz?
I was just giving a really good
Yeah.
example, I thought, of communicating passion. So I'm working as an executive coach for a tech firm based in Austin.
Mhm.
And most of the people are in Austin, but several of us are all around the country. Anyway, the co-founder was in New York last week doing a presentation to a new client. He took his wife and 18-month-old son and gave an update of the meeting on Slack to everybody with a picture of his son eating his first New York bagel.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a great example.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and it takes forethought. That's the thing, that you have to switch your brain from just reacting to what you're seeing to really thinking, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, don't you think, to really be able to communicate this? Because the passion, all these things I'm talking about are what bring energy to the job. It's not that you need it to, necessarily complete the task, but to complete the task well and to maybe bring just all the things it takes to bring your best self. You need energy. So presence. This is, to me, the hardest of all of these, because it's extremely nebulous and hard to measure, but it's something that people feel, and if they don't feel like you're paying attention to them when they're telling you something, they're not going to say, "Hey Liz, I feel like you're not paying attention to me." They're going to say, "She doesn't care, she's just checking the boxes." It's managing perceptions. That's a lot of what my work is about, because we all know what it feels like. It's so frustrating to be misunderstood or to be grossly misunderstood. And there's just like, these people, some of us, people who have had discussions on text that really don't belong on text. How can you be present to the people that you're dealing with? Oh, and I want you to... presence, all right? So you have lost the power of proximity. The power of proximity is a real thing. Think about those of you, how many of you have worked in big corporations? So isn't it cool in the big corporation, have you noticed that the cool thing, if you had your choice, you want to be near the boss. The bigger the boss, the closer you are to them, the better it is for your career. Am I right?
Yep.
Yep. So you don't have that. And your remote employees don't have that. They don't have, let's see what is the boss talking about today? What's important to her today? And so you have completely lost that. And you can of course it's expensive because you have to be in the same location to have that. You have to have a building, brick and mortar, many stories, lots of overhead. That is what you have to consciously make up for. And then there are no fixed answers, and doing the research to prepare for today. I mean, there are so many people doing so many different things, which I'm going to share in just a minute. But just realize that this power of proximity is a real thing, and you don't have it with remote workers. Yes?
Do you think that companies need to take into account more G&A and more overhead to account for this, where if you're close and working with your employees,
Mm-hmm.
you have less overhead you have to spend trying to reach them. Whereas now if they're distributed, I think, you brought up a case a little while ago, you have little powwows where you bring everybody together to
Right.
one location. And that's not necessarily overhead that most companies are going to account for.
Right. Well, all the research, I was researching virtual teams in my doctorate. I was, all over the place. I wanted to learn everything. So I studied virtual teams and media and film and Latin American political rhetoric is my specialty. So if anybody wants to become a Latin American dictator, I'm the person. Okay? But anyway, in studying virtual teams back in 2007, that was the the number one rule was that for virtual teams to work, you had to bring people together in the same room at least once a year, and twice a year is better. That was, and I think that still holds. And that's a cost, that's expensive. So you can, how much does it cost to bring everybody together? How much does it cost to have a building? How much talent can you bring into your building if you build it? How much talent can you access remotely? These are all trade-offs. I mean, the whole point of this conversation is just I want to, wake up everybody's attention to this is our challenge. I mean, on top of all the other challenges you have of running a business, this is a big one. Because you do not have the power of proximity. So that's a cost-benefit analysis you have to make. In each
Laura,
yeah.
to that issue, on the power of proximity, I think it's interesting about the CDC, versus the city of Charleston. So basically, for 27 years, I worked for the city of Charleston, and I consider myself in 20 of those 27 years a remote worker for the city of Charleston, because I actually put, basically distance among between us, just so I could execute the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And I was seen as so how I overcame that issue was through production. Don't mess with earnest, basically. Just, do not, I tell people, I said, we're a city employee. I never filled in a single form in the last 10 years I was there.
Because
It was
the
astounding.
results you were
Yeah, because of
delivering?
the results.
Mhm.
So I think when one of the things that I read, again, homework yesterday ahead of this, is that companies don't have a way of measuring the output of remote teams.
They don't.
So if you do, and you're looking at a dashboard, basically, Team Charleston is really just kicking ass. You're like, man, this is great. So they get rewarded, and they get that kind of thing. So it's not the suck up, basically. And my observation basically was I had begged off in the last 15 years when I'm in the city of attending the mayor's weekly meetings, and the comment I made to him was, isn't it ironic that the people who do the least have the most to say?
I would say that has lots of, that's fractal.
So he got it, right? And I said, so I don't really want to come to these meetings. If I've got anything, I'll just kind of send you a note, via email, or if you want
Right.
that kind of. So I think the power of proximity, I absolutely get that.
Mhm.
How you become less. So if they're going to have a riff,
Mhm.
well, let's just cut them because we don't really have any interaction with them. But if you're, you sort of create that accountability by I don't have proximity, so I've got to prove myself.
Exactly. And if you're like the only person working remote in a company or one of few, it's really the burden is more on you, the remote employee, to stay engaged because nobody really cares. And they kind of suspect that you're having way too much fun working in your PJs, maybe some resentfulness there. So that's on you. But if you're managing a team that's all over, it's the leader's job to keep the people engaged, unless you're paying like multi-million-dollar salaries, yeah.
To your point, Ernest, I think it depends on the person. Not everybody can work remote.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
And that's the hard part where we get back to the interview process and getting to know the people. Can they really work remote?
Yes.
Can I trust them to spend my company's funds reasonably or reliably?
Yes. My son, first year of college, had his classes, and one of them was on Blackboard. He totally did not tune into Blackboard until 2 weeks before the end of the semester when his teacher emailed him to say, hey dude, you're going to fail unless you do everything in the next 2 weeks, which he did, and he passed. But clearly he is not a person cut out for remote work. At least not yet. There's hope. Hope burns eternal in the mother's breast. All right. Oh yeah, this is kind of on the same topic. Some people, like on the topic of people where they're the minority, where they're considered the lucky ones, because they get to work from home. They're the whole thing of what Ernest mentioned, the perceptions of contribution. So some people will work overtime to make sure they are perceived as working hard. They're answering Slack right away, and they're doing this and doing that, just kind of like, see me, see me, see me. But you all know that one of the advantages of working remote is that you can do a deep dive you have fewer interruptions, and you can really get into it. But that deep dive work is exhausting, right? So you may work only 6 hours, or you may work only 8 instead of 10, and be making a larger contribution than other people. So that's another thing. The things we all love data, right? We all are data driven, but the things that are easiest to measure are probably the things that have less meaning. So how do you measure contribution? So just because somebody is always waiting by the phone for you to call them, does that mean that they're contributing? That's a question that you have to answer. Presence, again, you're paying attention. It's tuning into the conversation. It's trying not to be distracted, even though we're all on the computer and the phone at the same time. I find, for me, when I'm having trouble paying attention, either asking questions or taking notes. But it's something definitely is on you, the leader, because the main thing I want you to take away is that people can tell, and they're not saying anything, but they know. Like when I'm talking to my mom, and when she's gone on enough, and I start being distracted, she gets it. See you later. Presence means you notice more. That's another approach. And in coaching people who have a hard time listening, which is not to say almost everybody, being observant, seeing what cues you can pick up, what emotional messages you can pick up, just paying more attention, noticing more details and commenting on those is a way to show that you're paying attention. Recapping what they've said back to them, I mean, that's just a super old communication trick, but it shows that you heard them, it shows that you're paying attention. And that is what makes the employee feel valued, is when they know that you heard them. And that's what we all want to be heard, right?
Hey, Laura.
Yes.
Question. Is
Yes.
there a balance between presence and kind of like peering over someone's shoulder? Just
Micromanaging,
disruptive,
yes. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's harder to micromanage when you're not in the same room with the person. This is not, I don't know. I have never felt micromanaged, but face to face, you could definitely be paying too much attention, because remote employees by definition need to be empowered because there's nobody watching them. Yeah, so there's that. Well, I'm empowering you, but I want to know I'm paying attention too. It is something to balance. Does anybody want to say something about that, Lynn? Share, yes.
Well, I think with micromanagement, you can feel micromanaged sometimes when the pressure comes on. So you've got management who's responsible for the finances of the company. You're getting down to the end of a timeline, and depending on their personality, you have to step back and realize that's the personality. They're not trying to micromanage
Right.
me, but we're in a crunch situation where sometimes when you're remote and you're by yourself, you read into too much.
Yes, you absolutely do. Just like people read in too much to text and emails.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched a good point that anytime there's a crunch, anytime there's stress in the ambiance, everybody's brain kind of shuts down and becomes defensive, and everybody's hackles go up. Did you want to say something about? No? You're okay.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
while you're
please.
between things. About 3 slides ago, is a brilliant turn of phrase about, was it perceptions of contribution? Yes. This is a very exciting topic to me. So I work remote, and I used to not. And for me, so nobody asked me to do anything. It's entirely, I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody says great, etc.
Do you own the company?
No.
Okay.
I think we're unusual in that way. It's very sort of self-driven as far as the contributions the team makes. So I find myself maybe over-pushing beyond what someone would expect in order to make sure that there is a strong perception that Ted is delivering.
Yes.
Because I'm remote,
Right.
Ted better job one deliver.
Right.
Otherwise, for me, I have a very high standard for myself.
Right.
Maybe too high.
Right.
And I think that's common for remote people. On the other side, for people that work in proximity, maybe not a factory exactly, it's very sort of direct, but things that are a little fuzzier, it's easy, I imagine, to hide within the team if maybe on a certain day you're not contributing strongly?
A
Right?
day or a week or a few
Whatever,
months
a year.
or, a career.
Ah.
Absolutely. It's happened.
There are whole government departments where this happens.
Yes, exactly.
Not the city of Charleston.
Not
Actually,
other.
most of the city community.
So I only have a question exactly, but if we had more time, it'd be a great topic
Yeah,
to dive
just in
deeper
that.
somehow.
Well, the thing is, for you, if you're the one that's like over delivering and over communicating, that's great as long as you can sustain it. What the danger is that you're going to become bitter and angry and quit, or become irascible and crazy one day, and they'll be like, "What's wrong with Tad?"
It helps when you like your work.
Yes.
If you don't like your work, it's more dangerous. Probably.
True. That's
I
true.
think it's just important for the manager of the remote people to let go a little bit. I mean, stop managing on results and on activity. I mean, when you have an office and you're walking around, you can see busyness and you can see working.
Right.
For a remote user, it's kind of difficult.
It
That's
is.
when the micromanagement starts to come in, because then it seems like the manager's starting to ask a lot of questions, where the remote worker saying, "Hey, man, I just want to do my work."
Right,
You know,
right.
So lighten up.
Like, where were you? I called and you were not there. Well, I was in the bathroom.
which, if you were in an office, you just would have known that.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
So it gets a little tough.
Because again, there's that when the people working remotely are the minority, there's that just slight or not so slight perception like they got it good. They've got something.
Kick it back,
Yeah.
beer.
Yes.
I actually think though there's also a flip side too, right? How many of us, especially in engineering, right? How many people go home at night where a lot of work happens outside of
Yes,
work,
you're
right?
right.
They go home at night, there's that problem you're trying to figure out, the kids go to bed, whatever it is, you pick up your laptop, you put in another several hours, some crazy hours, no in particular. But there is that, because during the day, maybe you've seen, especially if you hit a wall and you leave early that day, and then you go home and you knock out the park. So there is both sides of it, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
there is. Again, but nobody's seeing you perhaps put in those nighttime hours, but do people
But they see your contributions at the end of the day.
exactly?
And I think it's the same.
That's a good point.
All right, positivity. You all know that being positive is better than being negative. It's even if you're delusional, research shows that even if you're delusional positive, it's better. Negativity shuts down creativity and problem solving. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Wrong button. You've all heard. There's research coming out of MIT, the media center there. I forgot the lady's name, but she's the one who did all the research on the microaggressions, but the counterpart is the micro affirmations, and those are just very specific comments acknowledging somebody's effort or results or good attitude, and those have shown to increase engagement, confidence, commitment, because again, what do our employees want to feel valued? If you say, "Hey, you did a great job," you did a great job is kind of generic, but what did you do a great job? That you got it in early, or that you paid attention to this detail, or that you used the right font, or whatever. The more specific, the better. Yes?
Yeah, I just want to add something because this is really, really important because there's a lot of research being done on feedback.
Yes.
That feedback can really be bad for people because managers tend to concentrate on what people are doing bad.
Mm-hmm.
And in turn, people really need to know what they're doing well.
Right.
Because for your brain perspective, that really reinforces.
And you're going to do more of it.
Exactly.
If you're doing it well, that's what you're going to do more of it. And then if you're getting bad, it's like, well, what do I do with that? Yeah.
This is so this ties into perception too, because if you think about reviews for
Mhm.
organizations as well, because you're used more, right? There's going to be more negative feedback, but in the grand scheme of things,
Right.
things are actually pretty good.
Right.
But yeah, that's a really good point.
So how do you have to come up with a way. I would just take, these are some tools that people use to try to get, engagement and buy-in and making people feel valued and feel passionate and purpose and positivity. But I just had to notice this particular book. And I'm like, oh, I'm not the only one. But all of these things are great events. But I just want to say one thing, and I want to hear what you want to say. no matter how many great events and invitations you put out there, there's always going to be some people that don't want to go.
Yeah.
I love the book analogy because my wife and I have a lot of conversations about things like this. There's a perception of reality that is not true that comes from our influx of media, of movies and stories and books, where we get this concept of a perfect world inside our head, and then we apply that to our life, and then it causes stress, anxiety,
Right,
and
because
frustration.
you're trying to meet an unattainable standard that doesn't exist anywhere except in the movies. Right, so, I'm sure does anybody want to add to this one? We're getting to the end, but these are the main ways to gather people together, basically, face to face in a room. Even though a book club you can do remotely, but the other ones are face to face.
I just want to say, I've had really good experience with, I think the broad topic you're getting at there about having soft, non-project ways to bring the team together.
Yes,
So it's not about the work.
Right. Yes.
We have a weekly meeting on Zoom. It's explicitly social, maybe a couple announcements, but let's have a funny question of the week.
Right.
It's not an update meeting.
Right.
And it's great.
And
There's people I wouldn't hear from otherwise.
Right. Well, acknowledging people's birthdays. There's lots of different ways to do that. Metronome sends, I think it's metronome. Somebody sends them a whole cake, not a piece of cake. Metronome sends them a gift card signed by everybody in the headquarters and a gift certificate. You can have a remote birthday party, but you have to think about acknowledging their birthday, because unless you're friends on Facebook, you're probably not even going to know when their birthday is. All right, finally, progress. And the point of this is to acknowledge small progress, kind of like the micro affirmations. That it's not just when people cross the finish line that you celebrate, but you celebrate any kind of progress that you perceive, whether it's effort, whether it's learning, whether it's moving in the right direction. And again, how do you use formal and informal distributed employees need more feedback. That's just like what Liz is saying. We all need feedback, but you can't run into your boss in the bathroom and say, "Oh, by the way, I finished this," and your boss says, "Oh, Laura, you're so amazing." No, so you have to think about ways you can structure the feedback to your distributed employees, and then your local ones, of course, will feel left out because they're not getting as much feedback. So, welcome to life. So these are the 5 P's. The purpose, again, is that you have meaning in the work. Passion is that the work is important to you. Presence means you're paying attention. The positivity means that you see that it's going to turn out well, that you're hopeful, and that you notice any progress. These are just to throw up some of the most commonly used tools. I don't know if anybody wants to add to this list or say one or the other does not work very well. But these are, yes.
One we're seeing that's kind of growing is through Microsoft's Office 365.
Yes.
Is Teams.
Yes, I have.
Teams is really like,
Tell
so
us about
we're
it.
an IT solutions provider. We're actually a Microsoft partner, and like a lot of, obviously the big push is moving into Azure and Office 365. And more organizations are implementing Teams because you can set up your internal meetings through that, as well as chatting and all those sorts of things.
Okay, kind of like a Slack incorporated
Yeah.
into. All right, I will add that to the list. Anybody else? And actually, somebody asked me about that on Tuesday about Microsoft. What Teams is called? Yeah. All right. So finally, I just want to say, I want to close with an invitation. For all of it, everybody in here, we love living in Charleston, right? I'm from Hampton, South Carolina, and let me tell you, Charleston is like heaven compared to Hampton. And I've lived in a lot of places in the world, and Charleston is awesome. And we want to keep bringing these high-paying, really good jobs. We want it to be significant. And I think that how we handle remote work is an opportunity for us to develop a competitive advantage vis-a-vis the rest of the country. So thank you very much. I hope you'll keep in touch. Oh, I have somebody this week recommended this book, and I read the free part on Amazon. I haven't bought it yet, but it looks really good. It's about Netflix and how they develop. So Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to hearing how you achieve world domination through student teams. Any questions? Any more
questions in case anybody's got any questions? And just so you know, this presentation, like all, recorded by Mike and made available Monday on the CDC website of the community. So all the presentations are there. If there are no questions, I have a couple of items basically that I thought I'd mention. I think I probably need to start doing this more. We are in the middle of our strategic plan, and without mentioning names, I met with somebody who I don't particularly like. How many of us could say we do that? But who's very, very biting in his criticism and such. And one of the comments that basically, from an hour and 20 minutes of conversation, what I was able to extract from that conversation was the CDC needs to go from basically trailblazing, which is what we did in the early days when nobody was, to wayfinding. So basically his comment was, we don't hear from you that much. The community needs a little more leadership. A lot of people are lost. That kind of thing. So just these point to different things. So I'm taking this. The plan will be presented to our board at the end of the month, but it's just a very aggressive, meeting with all the CEOs and getting the input. And it comes down to a really interesting, Laura. You're a communication professional. It comes down to communication. And what the general consensus is, you've done a great job taking from here to here. Well, we need to go up a notch, and without sharing some of the strategic plan, and that's something I'm happy to present because it's really very insightful into some of the trends and that kind of that are going on in the community. I'm just kind of taking all the input. So one of the things that I realized very quickly we could do is become a little bit of the arbiter of some of the events that we think that you should go to. So improve our calendar to basically say we're not going to put everything on. Use a group and there's 3 people showing up, for heaven's sake. We're not going to do that. But at the end of the day, we are going to point to things that I think you'll learn and benefit from. We all have busy lives. It's just not like we can go to everything in families and that kind of thing. So keeping with that, SCRA has started a new series, quarterly series, basically similar to this, basically, which is sort of educational. And the next one they're doing, and it's at 5 to 6, so it's basically not in the morning, but it's in the evening, is on a go-to-market strategy. And I just thought that was very timely because I know Jack Lyles, who is a marketing and sales guy. There's an amazing number of people I've seen here in the buildings in my in the 160 companies that have come through the flagships where they're producing unbelievable stuff, but they don't know who their customer is. So they just think it's a great idea and basically going at it, spending all kinds of money. So that just happens to be the next topic. It's on the calendar. The second thing basically is we eased out basically of software conferences when a gentleman stepped up and did this, Syntax Con. Now, when we did it, basically, we were pulling, 5 or 6 speakers came to the West Coast, and they were 3 down basically from the CEOs. They were really top notch at the top of that game. Kubernetes basically back in 2015, which was the guy who actually constructed the whole thing. We're getting that now with Syntax Con. It's a smaller, lighter version, but I think it's gotten better. And so, Carl Phillips is running the conference. I just said, just give our members 10% off. That's on the calendar as an example. The other thing is basically for folks, basically, we had crafted a strategy back in 2013 into 15. But basically, what I told Joe Riley is I said, you got to create kind of what I call a bookended approach, which is tech on the right side of the peninsula and on the eastern side of the peninsula, and biotech on the west peninsula because I'm USC. But tech is kind of on its way. Like if you look at, Fish Lab just raised another $20 million and bought a company. Boomtown's up there, Blue Acorn's up there, Cerberus is up there. We're getting ready to, basically start our building, which will add another 75,000 square feet of space. There's a meeting, there's an event on the 24th, I think. It's an evening meeting at Boomtown, basically talking about the development of the eastern edge of the peninsula for software. So those of you guys who want it, it's a free event. It's on the calendar again. So basically, again, we're trying to be selective and say, well, is this something we would want to go to?
Mm-hmm.
So, I hate to say this, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm not being overly judgmental, but I'm just saying it's like, we have a certain standard we want to kind of maintain, so we want everybody to come up to a certain level. So that's something we're going to be doing basically in terms of the calendar. And In terms of the next presentation, you know these guys kind of oscillate between technical and non-technical. So Rick Norwood's going to present about basically insider threats on networks and security and that kind of thing. We typically think of outside a company. So he's going to do a great presentation for us next month on insider threats, which is you know, how somebody's disgruntled and they do something on the way out the door. It's more common than most people think, because I've had 3 people call me about stuff that employees that are on the way out, and I had to kind of help them a little bit. Not me directly, because I'm not technical, but at least kind of get them to the right folks.
Right.
So I appreciate you coming out. As I like to tell people, I said, these topics are based on what you guys like to hear about. Right? This isn't, we don't sit in the back room and come up with these topics. They're relevant. So it's as simple as sending Fridays at charlestondigitalcorp.com. It comes into to Chris and myself, and then you know we can kind of tee them up. So just when you have these topics that have interest, I just got thinking to myself basically. There's no remote workers club in town. I bet you there's one in Atlanta, basically. What they've done is they've just made it a wine club. And just invite all the, you know, and invite all the people to come out. So that would be something that's kind of interesting to kind of tee up. But any input that you guys have, you know, we will launch basically our next set of strategy, and it's really not a pivot. It's just an extension of some things we're doing. You know, one little insight is national companies are not coming to Charleston with remote teams because they've identified talent here. So on one hand, we're having this conversation about not enough talent. Well, the national guys are recognizing there is talent. You know, so what is it? You know, and I prefer from a business development standpoint, you know, what's the old saying, success begets success. So bring in more of the national companies, and then, you know, there'll be more people attracted. So my town strategy is completely different to what's going on in the community right now. And we'll kind of go from there. So, yes, Liz.
I would definitely say could be a real need for remote workers, affiliation, organizational, that to help us all keep our edge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easy, I mean, this is very much of a party town, which is fun. However, there's a big expectation for national and global employers to have really high quality caliber. And so I think for those of us who've worked elsewhere, I mean, not to be a total snob about it, but I will be a bit of a snob, and it's just nice to be able to feel like you really are staying on the cutting edge.
I agree. So that's something, you know, we'll put in the mix, you know, and how, and for me, as you well know, I mean, I like to take everything into how we execute it. So, you know, I want, you know, 3 points as to how we execute. I appreciate you all coming out today in spite of the conditions.
Yes.
Short-lived, you know, we hope. We needed the rain, so I'm glad we got some rain. And let us know how we can help you. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Thanks.